There comes a moment in every human life when noise loses its magic, when the applause that once felt like salvation begins to sound like static, when you realize the world has taught you to chase trophies made of air and love made of mirrors. It is the moment when you stand in the center of your own storm and realize the real battle was never outside. The greatest wars are fought in silence, with no audience, no spotlight, no validation. And the victor? The one who learns to walk away without needing to be seen. Maturity is not about the wrinkles on your skin or the gray in your hair. It is the quiet burial of your ego. It is the death of the desperate need to be crowned. Because you see it now, all those loud victories you used to chase were screams for recognition from people who didn't even know themselves. You thought you were building a legacy, but really you were just stacking masks on a shelf, praying someone would finally say, "Now you matter." But you already mattered, long before the medals, long before the title, long before the world told you who you're supposed to be. You mattered the moment you stopped chasing noise and started listening to silence. It is not weakness to walk away from noise. It is power, quiet power, the kind that terrifies people who still believe in theater over truth. You no longer need to be the loudest person in the room, because now you are the deepest. You no longer crave attention, because now you crave clarity. You no longer burn for admiration, because now you burn for purpose. And purpose does not need an audience. You see, society has taught us to equate volume with value. Whoever yells the loudest wins. Whoever shows the most is the most. But maturity is the art of reversing that lie. It is understanding that the tree with the deepest roots doesn't need to sway with the wind. It holds its place, grounded, still, powerful in its silence. Look at the lion. It doesn't need to roar to remind you it's the king. It just is. Look at the mountain. It doesn't need to announce its strength. It simply stands, unmoved. Real power does not broadcast. It radiates. It does not seek attention. It commands respect through presence alone. You used to think maturity was about being in control, but now you know it's about not needing to control. It's the confidence to let others misunderstand you, misjudge you, criticize you, and still not need to explain yourself, because you've outgrown the hunger to be approved, and that is real power. The person who no longer needs to win publicly has already won privately. And there is no trophy louder than peace, no applause deeper than solitude, no victory greater than knowing who you are without the world needing to agree. But this transformation doesn't happen overnight. It begins with betrayal, the betrayal of old dreams, old versions of you that once believed validation equaled victory. The ego cries, the soul whispers, and you, somewhere between the scream and the whisper, choose silence. You walk away from arguments not because you're weak, but because peace is more valuable than being right. You let others take credit not because you're invisible, but because you're no longer enslaved by ego. You do great things and tell no one, because the doing is enough. You give love that never needs to be posted. You make sacrifices that never need to be acknowledged. And you find joy in knowing that the real you, the one no one sees, is finally enough. Maturity is when you stop broadcasting your healing, when you no longer need to tell the world, "Look how far I've come," because the path you walk speaks for itself. Every step rooted, every breath intentional, every move born not from the need to prove, but from the need to live truthfully. You realize how many of your loud victories were, in fact, just cover-ups for inner emptiness. Promotions, relationships, accolades not pursued for their essence, but for their symbolism. You didn't want them, you wanted what they meant to others. You wanted to be envied, admired, seen. But when you mature, you no longer wish to be seen, you wish to see life for what it really is, not filtered through ego's hunger. You begin to unlearn everything that made you addicted to applause. You realize that loud victories fade fast, but quiet integrity, it echoes through eternity. You stop arguing with fools because energy is sacred. You stop chasing closure because not all stories are meant to be resolved, some are meant to be released. You stop performing because you understand that who you are when no one's watching is who you truly are. And so you stop needing to win in the eyes of others because you're winning where it matters inside. You no longer dress to impress. You dress to feel aligned. You no longer speak to be heard. You speak when it matters. You no longer rise to prove someone wrong. You rise because your soul is ready to ascend. And the liberation that follows. There is nothing louder than the life of a quiet mind. Nothing more dangerous than the man who no longer reacts. Nothing more powerful than the woman who smiles in the face of provocation and simply walks away. Because now she sees. Now she knows. Not everything deserves her fire. Not everything deserves her attention. And certainly not everything deserves her explanation. We live in a world addicted to noise. But the wise, the mature, they seek the rhythm beneath it. The rhythm of self-mastery. The music of restraint. The poetry of self-trust. It's not that you no longer feel pain. You just no longer weaponize it. It's not that you no longer desire love. You just no longer chase counterfeit versions of it. It's not that you no longer care what people think. You just no longer allow it to determine your worth. Maturity is the art of responding without reacting, of seeing through the mask without needing to tear it off, of moving forward without needing to be seen doing so. Because when you become truly powerful, truly mature, the world becomes small. Not because you've shrunk, but because you've outgrown its illusions. Keep walking. The quiet path is not empty. It is rich with the footsteps of those who no longer need the world to clap in order to feel complete. And in this quiet path, you begin to feel something ancient stirring in you, not ambition, not pride, not desire, but something far older, far purer. A calm that feels like coming home, not to a place, but to yourself. You realize now that the most profound victories are the ones no one else will ever see, the silent breakthroughs, the private decisions to rise when everything in you wants to fall, the nights you forgive what no one apologizes for, the mornings you rise without needing to announce that you survived another storm, because this world doesn't reward your healing. It rewards your performance. But you're no longer here to perform. You are here to live. You are here to be. And there is nothing more terrifying to the world than a human being who is simply content without needing to be consumed. Once you thought success was a destination, an arrival point, announced with trumpets. But maturity taught you that success is a process of unbecoming everything you were taught to need. It is the gradual, graceful disintegration of illusions. It is waking up and realizing the war is over and you no longer need to carry a sword. You understand now why some people are loud, why they always need to win, to speak, to be right, because they are at war with themselves. They fear silence. They fear being unseen. They fear insignificance. And so they chase noise to drown the echo of their own emptiness. But you are not empty. You are full of unspoken wisdom, of battles won in solitude, of scars that no longer scream for attention. You no longer need to dominate the room because you've mastered the only territory that truly matters, your inner world. This is the great irony. When you stop needing loud victories, you become invincible because nothing can be taken from you when nothing outside of you defines you. They can ignore you, slander you, doubt you, and you will not flinch because you're no longer building your house on their applause. Your foundation is internal, rooted, silent, immovable. You stop seeking the climax in every moment. You no longer rush toward the highlight. You begin to cherish the spaces in between the mundane, the ordinary, the small acts of quiet discipline, because you see it now. This is where life happens, not in the explosion, but in the embers, not in the victory, but in the endurance, not in being seen, but in being real. You learn to celebrate in private, to cry in silence, to grow without the need for a witness. And somehow this feels more powerful than anything the world ever taught you to crave, because it's yours. It belongs to no one else, not to the crowd, not to the algorithm, not to the opinions of strangers. It belongs to the part of you that has walked through hell and chosen not to advertise the journey. You understand now that power is not shown in confrontation, but in composure, in the ability to let the world burn around you and still protect your peace like it's the last living thing on earth. Not because you are indifferent, but because you have nothing left to prove. The old you wanted to win arguments, the new you wants to win peace. The old you needed attention, the new you needs alignment. The old you sought validation, the new you walks in self-possession. And it's not that you've stopped caring, it's that you've started caring about the right things, about your integrity, your time, your energy, your truth. You no longer want to be everywhere, you want to be where you belong. You no longer want to be liked, you want to be respected. You no longer want to be loud, you want to be heard, even if it's only by yourself. You've stopped explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You've stopped offering your soul to those who only know how to consume it. You've stopped performing strength because you've discovered the kind of strength that doesn't need a stage. And so you walk slower now, but with more certainty. You speak less, but with more impact. You do less, but with more meaning. Because the mature soul is not concerned with doing everything, only with doing what matters, what's true, what's aligned. And this shift, it's almost imperceptible to the outside world. They still see you, maybe even admire you, but they don't realize you're no longer doing it for them. You're no longer playing the same game. While they chase likes, you chase stillness. While they broadcast success, you cultivate essence. While they react, you respond. Or better yet, you don't. Because not every battle is yours. Not every invitation to conflict is worth accepting. And not every threat needs to be answered. You've learned the discipline of restraint, the elegance of discretion, the nobility of letting fools have the last word. Because you no longer seek to win in the moment. You seek to win in the long arc of your becoming. You no longer fight to be right, you live to be real. You no longer seek the mountaintop for the view, but for the silence. This is the beginning of true maturity. The day you stop needing your life to be a performance and begin living it as a prayer. Not a prayer for something, but a prayer of gratitude for everything you've survived and everything you've let go of. Because letting go is the loudest silence. It is the final word that requires no reply. It is the last step in the evolution of power, the ability to walk away undefeated, unmoved, untouched. And now you walk through the world like a cathedral, unshaken by noise, unseduced by applause, rooted in something no one can see but everyone can feel. And is in that shift subtle, almost invisible to the untrained eye, where the entire architecture of your mind begins to rewire itself, where your relationship with meaning, with time, with truth begins to change. The old reflexes begin to decay. The impulse to react, to impress, to retaliate it fades, not because you've lost your fire, but because the flame has become internalized, refined, pure. You no longer measure your worth by your ability to be heard, but by your ability to stay silent when silence is stronger. You begin to see how deeply the world has conditioned people to move from insecurity, to speak from a place of needing to prove they're not small, to act from a place of needing to feel significant. And when you recognize it in them, you recognize it in your former self. The you that once thought being loud meant being powerful, that success meant being noticed, Now you watch that old self with a kind of compassionate distance. You remember how exhausting it was to constantly explain yourself, to chase respect in places where dignity had no currency, to show the world you were valuable instead of knowing it quietly in your bones. This is where your thinking changes, radically, permanently. You stop asking, how do I look to them? And start asking, does this align with who I am? You stop chasing outcomes and start refining your intentions. You no longer move with the question, will this make me seem strong? But instead, is this what strength truly looks like for me? It's a dismantling, a shedding, a spiritual molting. You begin to value restraint as a form of wisdom. You see that wisdom isn't found in clever words or sophisticated arguments. It's in the ability to hold back, to observe, to let the world speak before you speak into it. It's in the knowing that not every stage is meant for your voice, that sometimes your silence carries more truth than any sentence could. And as your mind opens, as your values evolve, so does your sense of time. You begin to move slower, not out of laziness, but precision. You understand that urgency is often just fear dressed up as ambition, that the frantic pursuit of more is rooted in the terror of not being enough, but you've made peace with enough. You've redefined wealth not as accumulation, but as the freedom to be yourself without needing justification. This is the new language your soul starts to speak, one that doesn't translate well into the metrics of the modern world, but resonates in the sacred spaces of real life, where presence matters more than presentation, where depth matters more than performance, where intimacy matters more than impression. And that's when you begin to see through the surface of people, to hear what they're not saying, to feel the gaps between their words. You become less interested in what they show, more curious about what they hide. Because you know now that everyone wears masks, not to deceive, but to survive. And instead of judging, you start to see their pain, their fears, their desperate need to be loved, and you no longer need to expose it to win. You let them keep their mask. You walk away anyway. Not because you're cold, but because you've grown. Grown into the kind of person who no longer finds power in dominance, but in discernment, who no longer wastes energy proving anything to people still battling their own ghosts, who no longer sees confrontation as the only arena for truth, because sometimes the loudest message you can send is your absence. This change in thinking doesn't make you passive, it makes you precise, strategic, calculated not in manipulation, but in conservation. You've learned the currency of your energy. You've seen what it costs to give your peace to every battle, and you've chosen to invest in something higher, your purpose, your clarity, your inner stillness. And now the world seems different, not because it changed, but because your lens did. You see the same chaos, the same noise, but it no longer enters you. It surrounds you, but doesn't possess you. You move through it like a monk in a marketplace, aware, alert, but untouched, not indifferent, but unhooked, because the battles that used to call your name no longer speak your language. You've stopped seeking to conquer others and started seeking to master yourself. You've stopped wanting the upper hand and started walking with an open palm. You've stopped aiming to dominate and started living in harmony with your own soul. And from this place, your thoughts begin to form differently. You no longer ask, what do I gain? But what do I become through this? You no longer chase what excites you in the moment. You choose what expands you in the long term. Your goals shift from being seen to being solid, from being liked to being whole, from being known to being wise. This is not just maturity. This is transformation. The kind that doesn't shout or advertise. The kind that moves in the shadows and builds temples where no one's watching. The kind that doesn't need loud victories because its very existence is a victory over everything the world tried to make you become. You are not softer now, you are sharper. Not louder, but clearer. Not detached, but deeply connected to the parts of life that matter most. Truth, silence, purpose, presence. And you carry that presence into everything, not as a performance, but as a quiet revolution. And then you no longer need the applause. You don't need others to validate your worth. You don't need public victories to feel like you've won. You no longer live to impress. You live to be present, not to prove, but to express. Not to be seen, but to know yourself. Because true maturity teaches you this: to sit still in the middle of a chaotic world and still not betray your peace. To know that silence, when chosen, speaks louder than any argument. That walking away at the right moment isn't weakness, it's freedom. No one can take from you the peace you bled to earn. Every time you resist the urge to react, you win. Every time you forgive without receiving an apology, you win. Every time you move forward without needing to explain, you win. Quietly, powerfully, unshakably. You don't need to win in their eyes. You need to win where it matters most inside you. And you can, right now. Not when things are perfect, not when you're finally recognized, but the moment you choose to stop living to be seen and start living to be true. The moment you stop chasing status and start building depth. The moment you no longer need to win to feel strong, because you are strong enough to not need the win. That is the power you've forgotten you have, the power to choose. To choose not to react. To choose not to be pulled in. To choose not to perform. To choose to protect your inner world. In a world that profits from your distraction. Every choice like that is a quiet declaration. Not to the world, but to your soul. Saying, I am no longer a prisoner of how others see me. You don't need the noise. You need the truth. And you are that truth whether anyone sees it or not. Stand, even without a stage. Walk, even without cheers. Live, even if no one captures it. Because a real life does not need to be witnessed to be worthy. You no longer need loud victories to know you're on the right path. Because every grounded, silent step forward is a message to the universe. I'm enough. I have nothing left to prove. And that is the greatest victory of all.